Xander Price didn't believe in love, weddings, or anything that involved trusting someone with your heart, and he definitely didn't believe in marriage. So standing in the middle of his sister's flower-filled backyard, watching her twirl in a cloud of lace and joy, all while some woman fussed over a bouquet like it was a bomb about to go off, was not exactly his idea of a good time. Especially not when that woman was her florist. "Could you not touch that?" she snapped, grabbing the peony he'd just nudged aside. "It's the centerpiece. You don't move a centerpiece, ever." Xander raised an eyebrow. It was drooping. "It was perfect," she shot back, not even looking up. Her hands were moving too fast, snipping, adjusting, fluffing petals like she was conducting a symphony. "Now it's messed up. Looks the same to me." She finally looked at him, and that was the problem. Big brown eyes, freckles across her nose, hair pulled back in a loose braid that still somehow managed to look like something out of a shampoo commercial. She was flushed, annoyed, and absolutely stunning. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, blinking like she'd just realized who he was. "You're the brother, Xander," he said, offering his hand. "Guilty," she didn't take it. "Faye," she muttered, going back to her flowers. "Florist." He watched her, curious despite himself. "You always this bossy?" "Only when people touch my work." He laughed, and for some reason that made her glance up at him again, like she hadn't expected him to find it funny. "Noted," he said, stepping back. "I'll keep my hands to myself." Good plan. He should have walked away, but he didn't. Instead, he lingered, watching her work. She was so focused, so in control of her chaos. Sticking tiny pins into roses, adjusting ribbons, brushing pollen off petals like she was taming wild animals. "How long have you been doing weddings?" he asked, trying to sound casual. She didn't look up. "Long enough to not get distracted by tall men in expensive suits." He blinked. "That was specific. You smell like money and distraction." He laughed again. "I'm starting to like you." That made her smile, just a little, but it was enough to make something shift in his chest. He hated that feeling. He hated how easy it was to watch her, how she didn't care who he was, how she didn't treat him like a CEO or a billionaire or anything other than some guy who messed with her flowers. And that was rare, because everyone knew who he was. Xander Price. CEO of Titan Technologies. The youngest billionaire in the city. A man made of steel, cold, sharp, and completely uninterested in anything that wasn't profit. But Faye didn't care at all, and that made her dangerous. By the time the wedding started, he'd somehow spent 3 hours hanging around the floral tent. He told himself it was to make sure his sister's day went perfectly, that he just wanted to keep things moving smoothly, but really, it was Faye. It was the way she laughed with the other vendors. The way she adjusted his sister's bouquet just before she walked down the aisle. The way she stood in the back during the ceremony, arms folded across her chest, a little grin on her face like she was proud of what she'd built. She didn't try to talk to him again, and he didn't approach her. But he watched her all night. Even during the reception, when he was supposed to be dancing with relatives and pretending to enjoy small talk with people who only cared about his net worth. His eyes kept drifting to the woman sitting alone at the vendor table, sipping champagne and watching the lights twinkle through the trees. Around 10, he found her by the dessert table stealing a second cupcake. "Caught you," he said. She jumped. "You scared me." "I seem to do that a lot." She looked at him for a long second. "You're still here, my sister's wedding." "You hate weddings." He tilted his head. "How do you know that?" She shrugged. "You've got that look, like you're counting down the minutes until you can disappear." He smiled. "You're not wrong. But you haven't left." He looked at her. "Maybe I found a reason to stay." Faye blinked, her fingers tightening around the cupcake wrapper. "I don't date clients," she said quietly. "I'm not a client. You're the brother of the bride. Not the same thing." He stepped just a little closer. "And my sister's married now. I'm officially off duty." She tried to look unaffected, but her breath caught just a little. "I'm not interested in games," she said. "Neither am I. And I'm not impressed by money." "Good," he said. "Because I'm not offering you any." She stared at him, uncertain, and then she whispered, "What are you offering?" He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Dinner," she laughed softly. "That's it, for now." They had dinner 3 nights later, not at some over-the-top 5-star restaurant, but at a tiny Italian place tucked away in an alley she liked. He let her pick it. He wore jeans. She wore a sundress. They drank wine, shared ravioli, and talked like they'd known each other for years. She told him about her shop, how she'd built it from nothing, how her mom taught her how to tie her first bouquet, how she didn't like people who thought money could solve everything. He told her about his company, how he'd started it when he was 23, how he didn't sleep much, how he never let anyone get too close. Faye leaned in, eyes soft. "Why not?" He hesitated. "Because people leave or lie or want something." She didn't say anything for a beat. "Then I'm not going to ask you for anything. I know." And he believed her. That scared him more than anything. By the time he dropped her off at her apartment, they were both quiet. He walked her to her door. She turned to face him. "I had fun, so did I." She took a breath. "You're not what I expected." "Most people aren't," she smiled. He reached out, brushing his thumb over her jaw. "Can I see you again?" he asked. Faye nodded. "Yeah, you can." And just like that, something shifted, something real, something dangerous. Because Xander Price had spent 33 years believing love was a myth. That marriage was a trap. That emotions only got in the way. But now he was looking at a florist with dirt under her nails and fire in her eyes, and he was starting to think he might have been wrong. Xander stood outside the flower shop 2 weeks later, staring at the painted sign on the glass that read "Bloom and Stem." The windows were framed with climbing ivy, and inside he could see Faye moving between buckets of fresh-cut flowers, her braid now pinned up with a pencil jabbed through it like a makeshift hairpin. She hadn't noticed him yet. He pushed the door open, the bell above it letting out a soft chime. She glanced up, her expression unreadable for a moment before it settled into something cautious. "You don't strike me as the kind of man who buys flowers," she said, not looking at him as she returned to trimming stems. "I don't," he replied, stepping inside. "But I figured I should see where all the magic happens." She gave a non-committal sound, reaching for a bunch of pale anemones. "Well, here it is. Buckets, water, thorns, and a very unreliable air conditioning unit." He leaned against the counter, hands in his pockets. "You're avoiding me. I'm working." "You've been working every time I call." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she arranged the flowers in a tall glass vase, her movements precise. "I thought we agreed to take things slow," she said finally, eyes still on the petals. "But this feels fast." "I didn't realize showing up was against the rules." "It's not," she said, her voice quieter now. "I just don't know what you want from me, Xander." He studied her face, the way her jaw tightened when she was unsure, the way her fingers hovered over the next stem like she wasn't sure it belonged. "I want to know you," he said. "Not in a boardroom, not over champagne, just like this. You in your world." She looked up at that, but there was hesitation in her eyes. "People like you don't stay in places like this." "That's funny," he said, stepping closer, "because I haven't wanted to leave since I walked in." Faye let out a breath, setting the vase aside. "You're charming, I'll give you that. I'm not trying to charm you." She gave him a look. "Okay," he admitted with a faint grin, "maybe a little, but I'm serious, Faye. I don't do this. I don't show up. I don't chase." "Then why now?" "Because you're the first person in years who's made me feel like I'm not just a name on a building." That finally made her pause. The shop was quiet except for the faint hum of the fridge in the corner and the soft rustle of petals as the air shifted. Faye glanced down at her hands, then back at him. "I'm not a project," she said, "I know. And I'm not something you fix or collect or control." "I don't want to control you," he said. "I just want to be around you." She searched his face for a long moment. Then, without a word, she turned and disappeared into the back. He waited. A minute later, she returned holding a small bouquet wrapped in brown paper. "For your office," she said, handing it to him. He took it, surprised by the gesture. "You're giving me flowers." "I'm letting you leave with flowers," she corrected. "There's a difference," he laughed under his breath. "Does this mean I pass the test?" "No," she said, moving back behind the counter. "It means I'm still deciding if there needs to be one." The next time he saw her, she wasn't in her shop. He was walking through the lobby of his building, phone pressed to his ear, when he caught a flash of a familiar braid near the front desk. Faye stood there, wearing a navy blouse and dark jeans, holding a small potted orchid. She looked up as he approached, clearly caught. "This wasn't the plan," he said, sliding his phone into his pocket. "Are you here to spy on me?" She lifted the orchid. "A client of mine works here." "I was dropping this off. Coincidence? Possibly," he narrowed his eyes. "You don't believe in coincidences." "No," she admitted, "but I do believe in curiosity." "About me? About the man who says he doesn't chase but keeps showing up?" He stepped closer. "You're not exactly hiding, Faye. I'm not exactly available either." He tilted his head. "Is that supposed to scare me off?" "I don't know," she said, her tone more vulnerable than before. "Is it?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he held out his hand. "Come upstairs. Let me show you where I spend my days." She hesitated, fingers tightening around the ceramic pot. "You don't have to stay," he said. "Just 5 minutes." Faye studied him for a beat longer, then slowly placed the orchid on the front desk. When they stepped into the private elevator, she didn't speak. But her eyes swept the mirrored walls, the polished chrome buttons, the faint scent of sandalwood that clung to his tailored suit. When the doors opened to the top floor, she stepped out first. The view hit her immediately, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the skyline, the river glinting in the distance, the city buzzing beneath them. "This is something," she said, walking slowly toward the glass. "It's efficient." "It's cold," she countered, turning to face him. He shrugged off his jacket, tossing it onto one of the leather chairs. "It's quiet. I like quiet. And yet you keep showing up in my noisy little life." He crossed the room, stopping just in front of her. "Maybe I want something different." "Different how?" "Different from the people who nod along and tell me what I want to hear. Different from the deals and the numbers and the silence." She didn't move, but something in her expression softened. "You think I'm different?" she asked. "I know you are." Faye looked at him, really looked this time, her gaze moving past the expensive belt and the watch that probably cost more than her rent, past the confident stance, past the title, and maybe, just maybe, she saw the man underneath. "I don't know what you're expecting from this," she said. "I'm not expecting anything," he said. "I'm hoping—" That night they didn't kiss. He walked her down to the street, held the door of her rideshare open, and didn't try to follow. But before she slid inside, she looked up at him and asked, "Do you always get what you want?" "No," he said, his voice low. "But I never stop trying." Her lips curved just slightly. Then she stepped into the car and disappeared into the night. And that's when Xander knew this wasn't going to be simple, but it was already too late to walk away. Faye didn't answer his calls for 4 days, not because she was angry. Not because he'd done anything wrong, but because the closer he got, the harder it became to breathe. She'd built a life out of control, out of color-coded invoices, delivery routes, and flowers that bloomed on schedule. But Xander Price didn't come with a schedule. He didn't ask for space. He didn't need permission. He just showed up. So when he appeared on a Wednesday afternoon, standing in the doorway of her workshop with his sleeves rolled and his tie gone, she didn't even pretend to be surprised. "You're early," she said, not looking up from the crate of ranunculus she was sorting. "You didn't say what time to come." "I didn't say to come at all." He stepped inside, glancing at the buckets overflowing against the wall. "You always this welcoming?" "Only when I'm elbow-deep in wholesale chaos." "I brought lunch," he said, holding up a paper bag that smelled faintly of sesame and ginger. She hesitated, then wiped her hands on a towel and nodded toward the back. They sat on overturned storage crates, surrounded by empty vases and the faint scent of eucalyptus. He unpacked the food, no containers, no labels, just 2 steaming cartons and a pair of wooden chopsticks. "You ever not take over a room?" she asked, poking at her noodles. He glanced at her. "You ever let anyone in without making them earn it?" She met his gaze, something unreadable flickering behind her eyes. "I've let people in before," And they left. He didn't respond right away. Just picked at the dumpling in front of him, then set it down untouched. "That's not me," he said quietly. Faye leaned back against the wall, watching him. "You say that like it's a promise. It is. You don't strike me as the promising type." "I wasn't," he said, "until I met you." She looked away, heart pounding in places she'd long stopped letting anyone touch. "I don't need saving, Xander. I'm not here to save you." "Then what are you doing?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Trying to figure out if you'll ever let me be part of your life." The words hung there, raw and too real. She couldn't deny the way her pulse jumped when she saw his name on her phone, or how she'd caught herself rearranging her shop window, wondering if he'd walk past. But letting him in meant giving up the quiet lines she'd drawn around her heart, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that. "There's a fundraiser," he said after a beat. "Tomorrow night. My company sponsors a children's tech program, Black Tie." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you inviting me or informing me?" "I'm asking you to come with me." Faye stood, brushing imaginary lint from her jeans. "I don't own anything Black Tie. I've already made arrangements." She narrowed her eyes. "You bought me a dress." "No," he said, rising to his feet. "I booked a fitting. You can say no." She didn't say no. The boutique was tucked into the second floor of a quiet building in Tribeca. No glittering signs, no press outside. Just a narrow staircase and a single brass plaque on the door. Inside, it was a different world. Soft lighting. Champagne flutes. A woman with silver hair and a tape measure around her neck greeted Faye like she already knew her name. "I don't usually do this," Faye muttered as she stepped into the dressing room. "I know," Xander said from the other side of the curtain, "but I really want you there." She didn't respond. But she didn't walk out either. The dress she chose wasn't flashy or covered in beads. It was simple, elegant, and fit like it had been made for her. She stepped out quietly, smoothing her hands over the fabric. He turned, and for the first time since they'd met, he didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes said everything. She studied him in the mirror as he stepped closer, his reflection tall and steady beside hers. His hand brushed her lower back, and the warmth of it settled into her bones. "I don't belong in your world," she said softly. "Then I'll build a new one," he replied. The gala was held in a rooftop ballroom overlooking the East River. Crystal chandeliers, walls of glass, a string quartet playing softly near the entrance. Faye felt like she'd stepped into a movie she hadn't auditioned for. Xander didn't leave her side. He introduced her to board members, donors, and executives without a hint of discomfort. Held her hand when the room got too loud. Watched her instead of the cameras. Halfway through dinner, a woman in a sleek red gown slid into the empty seat beside Faye. "You must be the florist," she said, her smile razor sharp. "I'm Camilla. Xander and I used to work together." Faye nodded politely. "Nice to meet you." Camilla turned to Xander. "Didn't expect to see you with someone tonight." He didn't take the bait. "Faye's with me." "Clearly," Camilla said, her tone cool. "Though I'm surprised, you never struck me as the type to settle." Faye's grip on her fork tightened. Xander leaned in, his voice low but firm. "People change." Camilla raised a brow. "Do they?" He didn't look away. "I have." Faye excused herself a few minutes later, needing air. She stepped out onto the terrace, the night breeze brushing against her skin. Below, the city glittered alive and indifferent. She heard the door open behind her, then his footsteps. "You didn't have to defend me," she said without turning. "It wasn't defense," he said. "It was truth." She faced him. "That woman doesn't think you're capable of real feelings. She's not the one I'm trying to prove anything to." Faye crossed her arms. "Why me?" "Because you see through everything," he said. "And I want to be seen." She exhaled, the ache in her chest swelling. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I." There was a long silence between them, then his hand found her steady, warm, and real. "I don't need you to fall in love with me tonight," he said. "Just don't walk away." Her fingers tightened around his, and for once she didn't. Faye stepped into the atrium of Titan Technologies the following Monday morning, her heels clicking softly against the marble. The place was a temple of precision, clean lines, polished surfaces, and a quiet efficiency that felt surgical. She didn't belong here and she knew it, but she was here anyway. Xander's assistant, a polished woman with a clipboard and a voice like dry ice, ushered her through the executive floor without a word. The doors to his office were already open. Xander stood at the window, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a steaming mug. He looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was missing, his shirt slightly untucked, and his jaw was shadowed with a day's worth of stubble. "You came," he said without turning. "I had to," Faye replied. "You left your phone in my apartment." He glanced over his shoulder. "That's not why you came." She crossed the threshold, setting the phone on his desk. "No, it's not." He turned fully now, setting the mug aside. "So what changed?" "I did," she said. "Or maybe I just stopped running from what I already knew." He walked toward her, cautious despite everything between them. "Faye, I didn't come here to ask you for anything," she interrupted. "I'm not looking for promises or some dramatic grand gesture. I wasn't offering one." "I know," she said quietly. "That's why I'm still standing here." The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged like the moment before a storm when the air holds its breath. "I don't want to be another part of your life you schedule between meetings," she said. "I need to know I matter even when I'm not wearing a gown or standing next to you at a fundraiser." Xander stepped closer, his voice low but clear. "You matter when I'm alone in my apartment, trying to remember what it felt like before I knew your laugh. You matter when I wake up and instinctively reach for my phone, hoping you've messaged. You matter when I'm in meetings, wishing I was anywhere else." Her throat tightened. "That's not the kind of love you can fake." "I'm not faking anything with you." She studied him for a long beat. "Then why haven't you told me what you're afraid of?" He blinked, caught off guard. "What makes you think I'm afraid?" "Because you look at me like I could wreck everything you've built," she said. "And maybe I could, but I'd never do it on purpose." He exhaled, almost like it hurt. "I've spent my entire life earning power so no one could take anything from me again. And then you walked in with a pair of clippers and dismantled every wall I had without even trying. I didn't come into your life to destroy it." "You didn't destroy it," he said. "You made me realize I was surviving, not living." The air shifted between them, and for once there was nothing left to guard. He stepped forward again, pressing his forehead to hers, his voice barely above a whisper. "Marry me." Faye's breath caught. "What? I used to think marriage was a trap, a contract, a liability." His hands framed her face, steady and warm. "But with you, it feels like the only thing in my life that would make me whole." She stared at him, her heart thudding in her chest. "You're serious." "I've never been more sure of anything. I don't need a ring or a big ceremony." "You're getting both," he said. "But I'll take you any way you'll have me," she laughed, the sound breaking through the tension like sunlight. "You don't even know what kind of flowers I like. Then we'll have a wedding full of surprises." "I don't want to be a trophy wife." "Then be my partner," he said. "My equal, build something with me, something real." Her voice was barely audible. "I want that." "Then say yes." Faye hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Yes." The next weeks moved like a whirlwind. Xander didn't do anything halfway. He didn't hire a wedding planner, he hired 3. He didn't book a venue, he bought a historical conservatory in Hudson Valley and had it transformed into a glass garden. He didn't ask her what dress she wanted, he flew in a designer and told her to make whatever Faye dreamed of. But the day of the wedding, despite the grandeur, it wasn't the gold leaf invitations or the champagne tower that made Faye's breath catch. It was the way Xander looked at her, not like she was an accessory to his empire, but like she was the reason it had all been built. He stood at the altar in a black suit with no tie, waiting with a stillness that felt reverent. As she walked toward him, bouquet trembling slightly in her hands, the world fell away. "You're late," he whispered when she reached him. She smiled. "You're lucky I showed up at all, always." The ceremony was short, intimate, no cameras, no press, just close friends, family, and the soft rustle of wind through the glass walls above them. When the officiant asked him to repeat the vows, Xander didn't read from the card. He spoke from memory. I never believed in forever. But then you walked into my life and made me question everything. You made me want to rebuild my world with softer edges. You're not perfect, and neither am I, but I'm yours. And I will love you, protect you, and choose you every single day. Faye blinked hard, trying to keep the tears from falling. When her turn came, she took a breath deeper than she'd ever taken. You made me believe love doesn't have to be fragile. That it can be fierce and steady and completely unexpected. I don't care about your money or your name. I care about the man who showed up when I wasn't expecting anyone. And I vow to keep showing up for you. When they kissed, the room erupted, but neither of them noticed. Because for the first time in both their lives, everything made sense. The man who never wanted to marry had just promised forever. And the woman who never trusted anyone with her heart had given it away completely. Together, they'd built something neither of them ever thought they'd have. Not a perfect life, but a shared one, and for them that was everything. Faye rested her chin on the curve of Xander's shoulder, her fingers laced through his as their first dance wound to a close. The conservatory lights had dimmed to a golden hush, casting the gathered guests in a soft glow. Outside, the rain that had threatened all day now drummed gently against the glass dome overhead, but inside, everything felt still. Anchored, he leaned in close. You're far too calm for someone who just got married. She smiled without looking at him. I think it's the first time I've felt still in months. Xander's thumb brushed over her knuckles. You're not waiting for the other shoe to drop, maybe, she whispered, but I think I trust you to catch it now. The music faded, replaced by polite applause and the gentle clinking of glasses. Faye stepped back, her dress sweeping over the marble as she glanced around the room. Friends, family, even a few of her longtime vendors had made the trip. Her assistant Nora was laughing with Xander's cousin near the cake table, and her mother was deep in conversation with someone from Xander's board. She turned to him. Did you notice the orchids in the centerpieces? I noticed you arranged them yourself even though you promised not to work today. I didn't promise. I said I'd try. He reached for 2 champagne flutes from a passing tray and handed her one. What am I going to do with you? You married me, she said dryly. Too late to back out now, good. I'm exactly where I want to be. Later that evening, after the final toast had been made and the last of the guests had disappeared into sleek cars and waiting shuttles, Xander kicked off his shoes and sank into one of the velvet chairs in the conservatory's side lounge. Faye curled up beside him, barefoot now, her gown pooled around her like a silk tide. Do you think we'll ever get used to this? She asked softly, being together? No, being this? Happy, he tilted his head toward her. Are you asking if we'll start finding each other boring? Maybe, she said, teasing. You're a man who owns 3 phones. I'm a woman who panics when the till doesn't balance. I love that about you. She glanced sideways at him. That I panic, that you care. Faye leaned into him then, her shoulder tucked beneath his arm, the quiet of the garden echoing around them. I was thinking, she said after a long silence, about expanding the shop. There's a space opening up next door. I've been putting it off, but I'm not afraid anymore. Xander looked down at her. Do it. You're not going to offer to buy the building. No, he said, because I know you'd turn me down, but I'll invest as a silent partner. Or loud if you want me behind the counter in an apron. She laughed, the sound echoing against the glass. God, can you imagine? You'd send the roses out with invoices. We'd be very profitable. You'd scare the brides. I'd save them from themselves. She leaned over and kissed him, the kind of kiss that didn't need to prove anything, the kind that simply said, I'm here. The next morning, they flew to a private villa in Puglia, nestled between olive groves and pale cliffs that dropped into the sea. The staff had already stocked the kitchen with fresh pasta, lemons, and too many bottles of wine. But it wasn't the luxury that made it memorable. It was the quiet breakfasts in the courtyard, Xander reading aloud from a novel she'd brought and pretended not to care about. It was Faye dragging him through countryside markets, bartering in broken Italian with a confidence he found both alarming and adorable. It was the two of them, barefoot on ancient stone floors, dancing to music from a crackling radio at midnight. One afternoon, as they lay beneath a linen canopy overlooking the sea, Faye turned to him with a furrowed brow. "You know what I realized? That you forgot to water the shop's ferns before we left," she swatted his arm. "No, I realized I don't miss anything." "Anything," she nodded. "The chaos, the stress, even the planning, I don't miss any of it. I used to think I could never step away. That everything would collapse without me, but now, you trust it'll be there when you get back. I trust myself enough to let go." Xander let his hand trail down her back. "I think that's what love does. It doesn't fix you. It just gives you a place to rest while you do the work." Faye traced circles on his chest with her fingertip. "When did you get so wise?" "About 10 minutes after you said yes." They stayed in Italy for 2 weeks. On the final night, over a dinner of grilled artichokes and lemon risotto, Faye reached across the table and took his hand. "I want to build something together," she said. "Not just a life, something that's ours. Not your company, not my shop, something new." Xander looked at her, eyes steady. "Tell me what you need. We start small," she said. "Workshops, floral design but with a twist. You teach the business side, I teach the creative. We open it up to kids who never thought they'd be good at either. You want to teach? I want to share what I've learned. And I want you beside me when we do." Xander nodded slowly. "Then that's what we'll do." They returned home the next day, and within a month the first of their workshops had launched. What began as a weekend program in the back of her expanded shop grew quickly, fueled by word of mouth and a waiting list that doubled every week. They called it Root and Rise. She handled the blooms. He handled the books. And together, they built a space that bloomed far beyond anything they'd imagined. 2 years later, Faye stood barefoot in the backyard of their brownstone, her hands covered in soil, planting lavender while a breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Behind her, laughter spilled out from the kitchen where Xander was attempting once again to bake bread from scratch. A tiny giggle rang out from the grass behind her, followed by a clumsy waddle and a thump. Faye turned and smiled. "You found the trowel again, didn't you?" The little boy in the bucket hat grinned, holding up the plastic tool triumphantly. Xander appeared in the doorway, apron covered in flour. "He's already more useful in the garden than I am." "He's got better instincts," Faye teased, scooping their son into her arms. Xander crossed the yard, kissed her cheek, and leaned down to tickle the toddler's feet. "You were right, you know. About what? I didn't believe in love. Or marriage, or forever." She tilted her head. And now he looked at her, at the boy in her arms, at the life they'd grown from nothing but trust and a little chaos. "Now I can't imagine a single breath without it."